The Carousel of Death. Episode 2. The Man Who Wasn't There. The next morning, at exactly 10 o'clock, Mabel Pitt returned to the Regent Hotel. She took the lift to the third floor and walked along the corridor towards room number 322. The door was open. Voices came from inside, along with the sound of furniture being moved. Mabel looked into the room and froze. Several workmen were inside. One was painting the ceiling, another was repairing the floor, and a third was hanging new wallpaper. The bed was gone. John's suitcases were gone. The bedside table had disappeared as well, along with the gold watch, the amethyst ring, and the revolver he had placed there the night before. Mabel stepped back into the corridor and looked at the number on the door. 322. There was no mistake. "Where is my father?" she asked. The workmen stared at her. One shrugged, another pointed towards the reception. Mabel ran downstairs. Behind the counter stood the same porter who had taken John's passport the night before and entered his name in the hotel register. "What happened to my father?" The porter looked at her without recognition. "Your father? John Pitt. You gave him room number 322 last night." The man shook his head. "That is impossible, madam. That room has been under renovation for several weeks. No one has stayed there." Mabel demanded to see the hotel register. John Pitt's name was gone. She hurried to the board, displaying the names of the hotel guests. The card she had seen there the night before had vanished too. "Call the manager. He saw my father." The manager appeared a moment later. "John Pitt?" he repeated. "I am sorry, madam, but I have never heard that name before." Mabel went pale. "You spoke to him last night. You agreed to give him the room." "I'm afraid you are mistaken. Room number 322 has been unfit for use for weeks." Several guests stopped in the lobby to watch. Mabel saw something worse than disbelief in their faces. They looked at her as though she were the problem, not the man who had vanished from a hotel room. Mabel demanded to see the attendant who had served John his tea. A different man appeared. "That is not him." "He is the only attendant assigned to that floor," the manager replied. Mabel looked around her. "Either I have lost my mind or all of you have. A man cannot simply disappear." She turned towards the entrance. "I am going to the police." Outside, London was crowded. Visitors to the trade fair filled the pavements, while motorcars and taxis moved slowly through the streets. Mabel knew the city only slightly. Her father's disappearance had left her shaken. She had only one thought: the police. She approached the first officer she saw at a busy crossing. "Please help me. My father has disappeared." The officer listened carefully as Mabel explained what had happened. The hotel, room number 322, the passport, the tea, the register, and the sudden disappearance of John Pitt. The officer frowned. "Are you absolutely certain it was the Regent Hotel?" Mabel stared at him. "I took my father there myself. I saw him enter the room." The officer wrote down her name and John's details. "Come with me. You can make a full statement at the station." They started walking. At a crowded junction, Mabel suddenly slowed down. A young man was standing on the other side of the street. She stared at him for a moment. Then she grabbed the officer's arm. "That's him." "Who?" "The hotel attendant, the man who brought my father his tea." The officer looked across the street. The young man had just stepped into the road. The officer moved towards him. At that moment, a grey limousine swept in from the right. The car cut across the officer's path. A gunshot cracked through the street. People screamed and rushed towards doorways and shop fronts. The officer jumped back to avoid the car. For several seconds there was complete chaos. Above the noise came the desperate cry of a man calling for help. Then it stopped. When the officer looked across the road again, the hotel attendant was gone. So was the gray limousine. Several witnesses claimed that 2 men had jumped from the car and dragged the young man inside. Mabel stood motionless. Only moments earlier she had been looking at the one person who could prove that John Pitt had really spent the night in room number 322. Now he had vanished as well. It could not be a coincidence. Someone was removing the evidence, and whoever was behind it was prepared to do anything to keep the truth about John Pitt from coming to light. To be continued